Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. This is Peter Hawley. This is the podcast, Teaching in the Arts. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Taking as sort of a left turn today in a little bit, I'm talking to Joe Pollock. Joe Pollock is a student of mine from 1996. And if those of you who were here on episode 2, at the beginning of that episode, we talked about students shooting Jerry Lewis, and Joe was part of the crew that shot Jerry Lewis, and he's actually going to correct me on part of that story and talk about that shoot just a little bit more. But Joe, after he graduated from Columbia College in Chicago, he went out to LA for a while and decided he wanted to be a teacher. So he moved back to Wisconsin, got his MFA, and then taught K through 12 art, especially sort of middle school period of art. And then 2 years ago, he decided to, he had an MFA, he decided to go become a college teacher. So we talk about that whole journey, about teaching little kids art and cleaning up scraped knees. And then we talk about what it's like to be an art teacher and in college. And in college, he teaches all sorts of different courses. We'll get to that in just a minute, my talk with Joe, and it was really great to talk with him. But first, I just want to talk about the lesson of the day. Every now and then, you got to get mad at your students. You know, you don't like getting mad. I don't go in there being, the tough guy. But I get mad at them when they disappoint themselves and when they disappoint me by not working hard enough. It's one thing if they make a mistake and then they learn from that mistake and fix it. That's no reason to get mad. But the very first time I got upset at a group of students, a class of students, was probably 20 years ago at this point, and we were in an advanced film production class, and it was the one day of the semester we brought in a Nagra recorder. We were shooting 60 millimeter film. We had a slate. We really were doing a production, and I broke my class into 3 groups, and we had like 6 hours to do a production. And the first 2 groups went pretty well. It was all new, so it's understandable that there were some hiccups. But the third group just goofed around, and they were not taking it seriously, and they were playing around with the clapper, like trying to cut their noses off, and just not, they were being idiots. And I didn't like it. So I didn't say anything. We wrapped that day, and the next week we came back as a class, and I've had smoke come out of my ears. I was really, really upset. And I asked my class, I said, do you know why I'm upset? And they said no. And I said, well, you guys didn't take the work seriously enough last week. We were giving you this opportunity. It cost the school $1,000 or more to do that 1 6-hour day of shooting. I said, you guys didn't take it seriously. You guys were goofing around, and I don't have time for that sort of stuff. And I am really pissed at you guys. And they sort of got quiet. And I didn't know what to say. I was making it up as I go along. I didn't know where I was going to go with this. And I said, do you know why I'm so upset? And one student raised his hand and he said, because you care. And I said, goddamn right I care. And I was surprised by my own emotion out of it. And I actually said, okay, I can't do this today. And I sort of said, we're going to take a break now. And this is 2 minutes into class. And I walk out of the room. And I walk out of the room, and I had no idea what the hell I was going to do. I'm like, I either made the worst mistake of my life, and they're going to think I'm crazy, or it's going to work. And so we take a 10-minute break, and I go back in the classroom. And over the next 3-4 hours of that class, one by one, students came up to me and said, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to goof around. I really like this class, all that kind of stuff. And it really worked. And it took me getting really upset, and what I just said is about as upset as I get as a person, but it happens, and it worked, and it brought the class together, and after that moment, everything was fine. And I have to do that maybe every 3 or 4 semesters, just one little flash to show them that I care. And that's usually all it takes. But don't be afraid to do it if you're a teacher out there in the arts. So anyway, that's today's lesson. So my guest today is Joe Pollock. Joe was a student in my second class I ever taught at Columbia College, and he was the first student I picked to be my own teaching assistant. Joe is our first guest joining us via Skype. He's joining us from North Carolina, where he teaches at Rowan Cabarrus Community College. He teaches applied and fine arts there. But he got to North Carolina after being, for almost 10 years, a K-12 art teacher in Wisconsin in the suburbs of Madison. So here now is my conversation with my old student, Joe Pollock. So, Joe, do you remember the last time we saw each other?
I'm going to take a guess at this, and I think it might have been at like a Cracker Barrel in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
I believe you are right. It was a Cracker Barrel in southern Wisconsin. If it was Kenosha, Racine, somewhere like that. And we met in between us. You were up by Milwaukee, I think, and I was in Chicago, and it was sort of halfway between each other. And that had to be close to 15 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe. I don't remember. I mean, but I mean, quite some time ago. And though I'm only looking at you on Skype, you look great. You look like an adult teacher in the arts.
Yeah, it took me those 15 years to look like an adult. So,
so how you doing? Where are you teaching today? Or is today a non-teaching day for you? What are you up to?
Yeah, today is non-teaching day, and so I'm out in North Carolina, and I'm teaching at Rowan Cabarrus Community College. There's 5 campuses, but it's primarily in the Charlotte area.
Mm-hmm. What are you teaching these days?
I teach a combination of fine arts and applied arts. This semester, I'm teaching a computer art class, which is focused mostly on like Adobe Creative Suite. Mm-hmm. And then I also teach Video 1 and 2, which is essentially a digital film class.
Nice. And you like it?
I do. I've been teaching now for about 15 years, and so I find it to be a good place for me to be.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back before 15 years. So I first met you in 1996. You and 13 others were in that Film Tech 1 class at Columbia College in Chicago, and none of us knew what we were getting into, and here we are. I still, have contact with probably 7 of you guys from 22 years ago, almost 22 years ago. What got you to Columbia at that time? Where are you from, actually? I mean, I remember Wisconsin, but where are you from? And go way back.
Well, I come from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is about 3 hours north of Chicago in the Fox Valley area, and getting to Columbia was like a matter of spending a few years in college, sort of sorting things out. I spent some time as like directly as like an art major, and then I guess like all of us, I got bit by the film bug and did a little research.
What bit you? What was there a thing? Was there a film? Did you work on something? What got you into film?
Well, it's going to sound like maybe not quite as deep as the answer should be, but I can tie it almost to the first day we had class with you at Film Tech 1. It was the summer of, what was that, 1996?
Yeah.
And you were asking us like, oh, who's your favorite director? And so I was like fresh off the boat, so to speak, like really not much knowledge of all the great filmmakers and whatnot, but I remember I answered you, John Carpenter, because he scored his own films. And like, I just thought that was the coolest thing. And, you can think of those like little simple keyboard song, like
Halloween. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't really consider John Carpenter my favorite director, but I love the thing that bit me, I think, was the idea of being able to story tell the moving picture and then the sound. Yeah. Like, I just love that component.
When it comes together, when the two things come together. I mean, telling pictures with music. I mean, synesthesia is an idea there, where it's sound and picture working together to make this third thing. Yeah, I love that too. So you went to college somewhere before Columbia then?
Yeah, I bounced around a little. I hadn't really planned on I didn't have huge aspirations for college. And so I ended up at the local school in my hometown, which is a fine university. And then I thought I might adventure a little. So I headed out to Arizona State University and
had a good party time.
Yeah. I figured that wasn't the best place for me to be continuing. And also they didn't have a film program per se. I'm not sure what they have now, but like it wasn't as directed as like, say, Columbia's film program. And so I found myself getting to Chicago and film is what brought me there.
How'd you find Columbia? What were you doing? Just looking up? I mean, that was kind of pre-internet, so it wasn't like you were Googling film schools. I mean, what made you land on Columbia?
I think it's probably the proximity being it is an up and coming place. And it gave me an opportunity to go live somewhere like Chicago where, you're in your young 20s. It felt like something that would be interesting to do at that point in your lifetime. And, being able to still, not be that far away from home, I guess, is also weighs into the decision.
Yeah. So let's go back. Before that, you were an arts kid, right? I mean, you did arts projects. I mean, you drew, painted. What was your background pre-college?
Well, I've always been one of those kids that just, you could find me drawing. So if there was like something, like if you had time, I'd be in my room quiet 2-3 hours just working on some kind of drawing. And then I guess, like a lot of kids would answer that, like if there was something that needed to be drawn for school, that, I was one of the 2-3 kids that they went to. And so like, I've always loved doing that. And even at Columbia, pre all this exciting time of like title sequences that we have now, thanks to Kyle Cooper and like movies like Seven and stuff like that. I was making some things for some of the films we do there that, would be like hand drawn, and I was including into little mini title sequences. So I was even still at Columbia working that aspect of it.
Were you trained, or did you just naturally know how to draw? Did you have teachers as a kid that influenced you and helped you out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had, the Mrs. Mushak in elementary school. She was a great influence. And then I had a couple of nice teachers in middle school. And then ironically, I didn't take an art class until my senior year of high school, which seems kind of out of place. But sometimes in the world of academics or whatever, they start putting you in sort of a route that they think is best for you. And you end up in some math classes and things that I got into calculus my senior year, and I was like, I'm not meant for this.
Good move. Good to get to the arts. That is, that's a common story, I think, too. But what did these teachers, the elementary school teacher and the middle school teachers, what did they show you? Did they just encourage you? I'm guessing. But what else did they do? They can't really show you technique at that point, can they?
I think it is just a lot of encouragement, and there's, I think, some technique. Of course, having taught K-12 myself, I think you can start with fundamentals with kids as early as like 5th, 6th, and even 7th grade, and teach them basic fundamental concepts, and those things never change. Okay, so like it's just a matter of whether you're a basketball player or an artist, there's elements and principles that are very basic, and it's just what you can do to develop those as you get older and better, I guess.
Well, I mean, certainly fundamentals, you need the base to work from. I mean, that's why you do. I mean, I actually came from a class, a production 1 class just this morning, just before coming to do this. And I said, look, I believe in drills and skills. You drill it to improve your skill. And you shoot and shoot and shooting at it and shooting at it and shooting at it. And over time you get better and you learn shortcuts and you learn what you're good at. And that's the foundation. I mean, you can't just start at some high level, you got to build to that.
Well, I know, having come into Columbia, and I think you would probably agree with this, like we could even go back to like, all right, you're going to have to help me out, but I think my memory is a little or decent on this, whatever, but I know that you had come from a background at Northwestern Film School, and you had some success there. And then I think you were really getting in our heads at Columbia that, like your first real learning experience for it was when you went out and made your first film. Yep. And so, I mean, I don't think there's any substitute, like you said, for actually getting out there and
doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, that's what we did. I mean, pretty quickly in that Tech 1 class, you're cutting film first, you're editing whatever hide and seek, I think that exercise was.
Yeah, that's right. There's going to be a lot of memories.
Yeah, me too. And then, I mean, probably by the third week of class, maybe even sometime in the second week of class, we got a camera in your hands and you guys are shooting something. I mean, you're going out there and you're going to the park and you're shooting something. And I think you got to shoot and edit. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, and then you look at it and you discuss it. You have critiques, and you get better that way. So let's go back to that class. So you didn't really know, was that the first class you took? Was that your first semester at Columbia?
Yeah, I'd come in the summer, and actually I was taking that and a science class at this, so it was about 6 credits that summer.
Yeah, and so what you sort of took to it right away after realizing that I was okay with you having John Carpenter as your favorite teacher. The other thing that have favorite director rather. The other thing that happened was you had a really good group of students you worked with, and you and I've talked about this when we talked on the phone a while ago, but I've told the story right here on this podcast about Jerry Lewis, and I think that to me was one of the most significant events of my teaching career, of you guys working together and watching everyone in the class collaborate as you guys went out and shot and then killed Jerry Lewis. And but you told me I made some mistakes in telling the story, so you want to pick up that story of shooting Jerry Lewis?
Yeah, I was actually really impressed with how much you remember. And I mean, like, you probably can't have seen the film that many times in this day and age. It's sitting somewhere in an actual 16 millimeter film in like storage somewhere. And so it's like, I haven't even seen it in years, but there was a lot that obviously went into that film. And it was, I think, like, to think of a metaphor, it was like a snowball. We started with like this little... this little thing and started rolling it, and it just ended up becoming sort of this bigger thing as we kept moving it. And the one thing I do remember is coming to you constantly. And so I don't really think I became like the steward of it, but it started to become this, like you said, collaborative effort between many people. And I'm not even sure at the end, like, whose film it was.
Right. It was kind of the class's film. Yeah. I
remember coming to you, I think, used to like hand out little
film chits.
I forget film chits, and we were only allowed like 4 or something. I don't you might remember, but and I remember coming to you on several occasions and being like, I need more film, and you'd be like, sure, because you knew like we were getting into this pretty heavy, and so there was a lot of really cool things, like going back to the things we were talking about earlier about just learning when you're doing. There's some things you just can never like try to figure out when you're writing or when you're like storyboarding or whatever. And there's so many moments. And one of the things I remember hearing you tell the story was that was about Jerry Lewis's, he was in a blue sweater at the event that he was speaking at, where we went to film him. And then we went out and got a blue sweater. And I was thinking, nobody knows the pain that I went through to make that sweater look right, because you can't find sweaters like he was wearing. It had argyle arms, and it was like a V-neck, almost, I don't even know, like textured looking, like it was almost like corduroy. And I'm like, I'm never going to find this sweater. So I had to shop around at like thrift stores for what seemed like a couple of weeks, and literally, and I'm not like very good with sewing and things like that, but I had to put together a custom made sweater. And the base of it actually was green, but in Film Tech 1, we never worked beyond black and white. So we just had to match the tone. And so got the sweater together, but it wasn't quite as easy as getting a blue sweater.
Well, what you just described is you solved a problem. And problem solving is what creativity is. I mean, that's all you did. There was a problem. You worked really, really hard to figure out how to do it. And like, that is why, I gave you guys extra film. That's why any good teacher, I think, you guys were going, well beyond the extra yard. You guys were really working hard. You really cared about it. You weren't goofing around, even though there was plenty of goofing around. Yeah. And it would have been criminal for me not to give you extra film. And I really think only the good students keep pushing those boundaries, keep trying for more, keep asking for more, keep experimenting. And it was so clear that you guys were onto something, and that we were going to play it out as long as we possibly could. And I actually remember that class several other students in the class, Teresa Schechter is one I remember, offered up some film they had. Like, here, yeah, throw this in the pile. We can all go with that. I think you ended up probably shooting like 10 rolls or something like that. But yeah, where 2 or 3 would have been the norm. But it was well worth it. So okay, we went through that class and you went on. What else were you into at Columbia? I mean, I think I had you in another class, and then of course you became my teaching assistant for a mess of classes, which was always great for me because I like picking my own teaching assistants, and I've groomed a bunch of them. You were number one. I think you were the very first teaching assistant I get to pick.
Yeah. Well, that summer was like super influential because obviously right place, right time, like you mentioned, coming together with that class where, like you said, you're still in touch with several people from that class, and likewise where I made many good friends and have been to weddings.
Yep.
And I think we even have some marriages and children from that class.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
But simultaneously, I was taking that science class, and I remembered like thinking, not only from that class, but the science class, that this is the right place for me because there was just in that summer alone, we talked about the Jerry Lewis collaboration, and then I was in this science class where we had this like, this was pre-Netflix and all these, like binge watching television. We had this legitimate. I think he might have been a toxicologist from he was working with like the Chicago Police Department, and he would come in and tell us he would tell us about all this like crime scene investigation and all of this interesting things. And so he knew we were all aspiring artists, and he's like, for your final project, you need to do something creatively based. And so I decided I was going to write a song for that class.
Wow.
And I started off with an embarrassing, effort in my dorm room and an acoustic guitar. And because I was living in the Columbia dorms that summer, people heard what I was doing. And then next thing I know, someone was showing up at the door with their saxophone. And then someone showed up at the door with their keyboard, and so on and so forth. And that was like one of my first great lessons in collaboration. By the end, I turned in a tape with a song that I was actually really proud of. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of all the actual talented musicians that came in and lent a hand. And so that first summer really lent itself well for me getting like a great lesson in how let people make you better, like collaborate.
Absolutely.
And I always tell that to my students, especially with like film. I'm like, it's not like something where if you find somebody that is better at music than you are or a skill you are, use them. It's not like someone's not going to, accuse you of, cheating or whatnot.
Yeah.
So then I moved forward, and I think I started to find myself getting kind of a documentary path.
Yep.
And I started following that quite a bit, and then that took me out. I finished Columbia, and then that took me out to California for a little bit.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell us about that story. I mean, when you and I were talking last week, I had forgotten this part of the Joe Pollock story.
Yeah. Well, after Columbia, I think a lot of us decided to either go east or west, and I was one of the students that decided to go west, and that was a great experience because there was a lot of us out there, and I was living out there at the time with Dave and Deidre, who were two students from that original Film Tech one, and I felt like our apartment kind of became Chicago West, and so it was like we had sort of like a lot of familiar faces around and whatnot, and so I spent some time out there and studied a little bit at UCLA, and I felt like that gave me a real insight, kind of like a scouting mission or a day pass to something that, Well, but while I was out there, that's when I discovered that I had this calling, or whatever you might call it, to become a teacher.
Well, we'll go to that down the teaching path in just a second. But you told me something last week that I did not know about UCLA, and you were in some sort of producing program there, right? And you tell me about the fellow students were neurosurgeons and lawyers and stuff like that. But tell me about that program.
Yeah, that summer I studied in the professional producing program, which is has all the same instructors as their MFA program. It's just condensed, and it sort of offers an opportunity to. It's a certificate program, and it gives you an opportunity to sort of see a side of that world that maybe you wouldn't. And so basically when you're in that program, you have a lot of very like teachers that are, like, I'll give you an example. One of the people that would come in and talk to us was Art Linson, and he's and so like producer. It's, people like that. And so it's like, for me, that was really exciting to have people like that talking to you. And then we were all doing internships. And so not only are you having these really great people come in and talk to you, but your, like your fellow students are constantly inviting you to do things because they're working here, or you're working there. And so I think I explained to you, I felt like I had a day pass to like a country club that, I really didn't have any business belonging to, but it was a lot of fun.
So at that time, did you think you were going to go down a Hollywood path of filmmaking? I mean, this is before teaching. What did you think you were going to be doing when you were there and when you were in that program?
Yeah, I think that I probably did think I was going to end up probably out there, maybe not becoming a movie director, but like working in the business in some way, shape, or form. And so when I did an internship at Nickelodeon, and I really enjoyed it, but it was in development. And at the time, I think where I'm at now, I would have a lot greater appreciation for it. But at the time, I think maybe I didn't see that side of it or something like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, like you're thinking like lights and movie cameras and instead you're like sitting around with writer. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said a moment ago, you talked about, so in that UCLA program, that was where you got the first inkling of you wanting to be a teacher. What happened? I mean, that is such a left turn. I mean, you leave film school, you go to UCLA, you're in Hollywood. I know you worked on a few things, and then you suddenly are in this program, and then you get an idea that you want to be a teacher. What was happening then? Do you have any teachers? You no family, mom and dad, they aren't teachers or anything, right?
Well, actually, yeah, my mom, she was a third grade teacher in Long Island, New York, and then she ended up going back into the technical college system in the area where I'm from, and taught as an adjunct in ESL, and then ended up going into administration and finishing her career there. So I did have, I guess, that influence or background, but I think it was more like out of nowhere to me as well. I was telling you about how I was after the producing program, we had been encouraged to go on and study screenwriting. And I thought, well, I had taken a few screenwriting classes at Columbia, and I thought, I really enjoy writing. This might be something that would be really interesting to get in on this side of it. Mm-hmm. And so I was there and working and enjoying it. And I feel like I was writing some stuff that was decent. And we were all out the class to have some adult beverages, and we were sitting around, and everyone just kind of posed this question, like, where do you see yourself after this experience? And everyone gave the more appropriate answers, I guess, like, well, I want to write a screenplay, I want to direct this, and some of the people in that class were working actors who, you could see in, certain TV shows and films and whatnot. And the question came around to me, and I literally the words came out of my mouth, I'm going to go teach art to kids. And everyone, I think I heard a record scratch in my head, and everyone looked at me, what I thought was probably what they were really thinking was like, huh?
Of course they were thinking that.
Yeah.
Well, so what happened? What clicked that made you say that? I mean, I'm thrilled that you said that. I'm thrilled that you did that. But what made you? That's so foreign from what you were doing at the time.
Yeah, I think maybe at the time, like I went out west with kind of an exploratory mindset, just to see. I never wanted to look back and be like, not know what that was about or what was out there. But I think what I found, and a lot of people find, is that it maybe just wasn't the right fit for who I am. And honestly, when teaching to me felt like something where I might be able to go back and like give back, and maybe in the way that people would go in and like decide they're going to go to the Peace Corps or something like that, like almost like a time of service. And so I thought, well, I'll go do teaching for like 3 to 5 years, but that turned into a lot longer than 3 to 5 years.
You were sucked in. Yeah, I was going to do it for a semester, and here we are 22 and a half years later, and I'm at it. Yeah. So then you left LA and you went to grad school? I mean, you didn't start teaching right away. What's that journey?
Well, I came back to Wisconsin with the mindset that I was on this path already to become a teacher, but K-12 isn't so simple as to like you just start sending out applications. There's a lot of things that you need to accomplish with licensing and in different aspects, and so I had to go back to school. And while I was working that to go back to school, I decided I better get some experience and make sure this isn't just like, something that is out of left field. And so I started working at the Boys and Girls Club, which they allowed me to run an art program that was after school. And then it was working out, so they kept me on for a summer. And that kind of led me to understand that, all right, this is heading in the right direction. And so while I was doing that, I kept pursuing the degree that would allow me to get the proper licensing and whatnot.
Did you know right away when you were at the Boys and Girls Clubs or whatever those early classes you were teaching that you liked it or that you were good at it or that how'd you know? What happened?
To be honest, I didn't. But I liked the enthusiasm of the kids, and I liked that it was an opportunity. Like the group of kids that I was working with, the alternative would be worse, like what they might be doing if they weren't there working on like art or in the gym, playing organized sports or something like that. And so that part of it really sank in. It was like, this is meaningful.
Well, that's great. So you go to school. How long did that take, and when did you actually get in the first official sort of class? Teaching for real.
Well, it took, I think, about 3 years because you have to after you've finished the degree, you have to go back into a student teaching practicum, and like that takes about 6 months. And so when it was all said and done, it was quite an effort. And then, like anything, you finish the program and then you just start firing off resumes. And I actually had agreed to and signed the contract for a job in Las Vegas. And all of a sudden, this little school in the suburbs of Madison came knocking, and I went, and it seemed like a really great fit, and I got hired, and I ended up teaching at a middle school in Waunakee, Wisconsin.
Wow. How long were you there?
9 years.
Wow. Okay. So what was that like? I mean, now you are teacher Joe Pollock, and how old are you at this point? You're probably 26, 7, 8? What?
Young 30s, maybe like 32 or something like that. So it was very surreal.
I mean, do they give you like when I started, I was given a syllabus and sort of pointed the right direction. I mean, here you're teaching 5 days a week for 9 months, and that's a lot of time to cover. Multiple
6 classes a day. It's a lot of teaching. So you definitely get a lot of hours under your belt in terms of like classroom hours. But I can tell you in the beginning, well, you go through 6 months of student teaching where you're with like an experienced teacher. So you're not just thrown to the wolves, so to speak, but you still kind of are, because there's no feeling that I can explain in my personal life that is like stepping in front of a bunch of 13-year-olds in a room for that first time by yourself, and you're like, this is my ship. But I can remember specifically some of the things that came along with the education or with the job was a like lunch duty or a playground duty. And I can remember being outside on playground duty, and it was very warm out, which means it was very early in the school year, because Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of those kind of days in the school year. And I'm thinking, well, this isn't too bad. It's sunny and it's nice, and I'm getting, some fresh air. And then I saw a kid walking in my direction across the field with, I want to say it was like a bloody knee or something like that. And they kept coming closer and closer. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I wonder what adult out here this kid's walking towards. And he kept coming and then he stopped in front of me and started his whole explanation how he's hurt or whatever. And I'm like, I know it sounds silly, but it dawned on me that like, oh, I am the adult. And so it's like, there was a lot of those kind of moments in the early part. And so it's like, you have to snap into it and take care of business, I guess.
You have to become a professional. You have to become a professional teacher. You have to become an adult. You don't have kids, or you don't have kids. You didn't have kids then, I know.
No.
So what, what kind of school was it? It was an junior high school?
Yeah, it was a middle school, and in that particular school district, they have an intermediate school. So the structure was just 7th and 8th grade.
Oh, wow. So was it a good school? I mean, were the students decent students? They certainly had enough funding for an art program. That's a good thing. But what kind of school was it?
Well, without like saying one thing's better than the other or anything of that nature, the demographics very affluent, and the school has a lot of parent support and
good.
Consistently ranks, in the higher end of like the public schools in Wisconsin. And so in terms of like the day to day, we had a lot of kids who were they just had that structure, that support system. So they came in, they were expected to do well, and they did well.
Good. And how long were you there? You were there 9 years, you said?
Yeah, 9 years.
And what were some highlights? Any moments or two where you went, wow, this really worked, or I'm so glad to be here, Well,
that's a really good question. I guess honestly, it's not going to sound like fireworks or anything. I think it's some of the first times where like
we
I would explain something.
Can you just repeat that again? We had an odd little Skype thing. So just go back to, it wasn't any fireworks or anything.
Yeah. So I would say like probably the first times where I felt like this really works is where like, and you'll understand this, as an educator yourself, where it's like you're up there explaining something and you're realizing this is, it's on you. So I think the first time like I got the sense that it works is like, you work really hard, do your prep, you write your lecture or your lesson or whatever you want to, words you want to put to that. You come in, deliver it, and then you just see it happening. Like you see the production. The kids are like, there's like it's not like they're there's almost like a little energy or like a little buzz. They're busy, and they're like working hard at what you just explained. And for me, those were the moments where it was like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's like I worked really hard to learn something and put it in a deliverable message, and then came in and communicated it, and now these kids now know it. Yep. And I think there's a magic or a power to being able to share that, like being able to give the knowledge or something.
Well, the word you just used is a word that, since I've been doing this podcast, I keep coming back to: magic. I mean, it is magic, especially the younger the student, that you can, communicate this idea or concept, and then they execute it the way you wanted them to, and they're fulfilled and you're fulfilled, right?
Yeah, and like I think you would understand this as well. It's like you have a great responsibility to make sure, like I'll give you an example. I would see at that age level, or in that, when I was teaching K-12, about 250 kids a year. And so over the number of years, that's like over 2,000 students that came in and out the door.
Wow.
But you have to think about, there's a responsibility there to make sure you're delivering something that is of value, that they're going to leave this experience enhanced. They're going to come away with something of value, because they're not all going to be artists, but they still need to walk away from your class with, something that made their day better, or a better, way to be organized, or a better way to look at the world, or, however you want to, however you want to say that.
Yeah. So did you go after this middle school experience? Did you go to high school also? You keep saying K to 12. So at some point, did you get high school students?
Yeah, I did. They bounced me around a little bit.
Were you part of a district system, like you were in the school district?
I would stay in the district because you're already in the system and you're vetted and trusted. It's like sometimes they would need like can you teach this class in the high school in the afternoon, or can you teach a morning class to like these fifth graders or something of that nature? So yeah, I did teach some high school, and that was pretty fun because I got to teach things like ceramics and find myself like on a pottery wheel and doing things that, I normally wouldn't be doing in my, on my own time, but it's like something I felt like you can pick it up and, that challenges you to learn, and so I think you'll agree with this to some level that there's a lot of things you've had to learn to be a teacher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you not only did you have to learn new technology, especially in the film business. We went from, in your class, we shot black and white reversal film, and then now the film doesn't exist, and you're shooting HD, and you're cutting it on Premiere, and all sorts of things. So there's technology to learn, but then there's also how to command of a classroom, how to deal with students. Students are different. I mean, I didn't have to go to your class and worry that you were going to be on your cell phone. There was no cell phone, there was no Facebook, there was none of that stuff. I mean, we really got down to the business of the work at hand, the teaching, the education, the learning, and there were so many fewer distractions. And in fact, I would actually argue that the distractions there were good distractions because you guys had to go out and look for things to do. You had to go to clubs, or if you were turned on to new music, you had to go find that new music. It wasn't just, you couldn't sit in your bedroom on Google or SoundCloud or somewhere and just listen to new music or Bandcamp or anything like that. So there's that to learn, like how to talk to the students. And then there's the, in the changing times. I mean, your students, when you're in high school, they're worried about getting grades and going to college, especially if it's a good school. When you're in middle school, they have different kinds of worries. Plus, you're dealing with puberty and adolescence and all that kind of stuff. And you have to be, as a teacher, you have to learn how to handle all of those things. Just like what you were saying about the kid with the bloody knee. You had to learn how to do that,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things you can be like set up for and trained for, and there's a lot of things you never will be, and you just need to sort of be able to like figure it out, I guess. And it's interesting that you talk about all these changes, and so it's like I think about all the way back to the time I was first in your class, and then to like now being on the other side of the coin, so to speak, and standing in front of the college kids and whatnot. And I think about like, well, obviously there weren't those distractions, and there weren't cell phones, and like I was teaching an art history class last semester, and I would not have a problem with kids on the cell phone, but I would have to let them know. And I think that's like even part of the educating process, that you're here to like engage yourself in this process, not, be looking at your Instagram while we should be learning about the tribute money, or, or about, Leonardo da Vinci or whatever it is. And so it's like, I would go up on the whiteboard, and demonstrate my art skills and draw a little cell phone, and then I'd draw a circle around it, and I'd put a line through it, and I'd ask the students, anyone explain to me what or understand what this means, and they all be like, no phones, and I'd be like, okay, we're in agreement.
Yeah, you all have those little techniques. That's great. So now you brought it up. You made the leap to college. What happened? When did that happen? Why? I mean, that's a crazy difference. And you went from Wisconsin to North Carolina. Talk me through that whole process and thought process to go from K-12 to college.
Well, I think that it was on the to-do list. So it just was sitting out there as something that I wanted to eventually experience. And while I was teaching K-12, I worked my way through a master's program. And so I guess the difference between teaching K-12 and teaching at the college level is that the K-12 level, the master's is not required, where it's at the college level it is. And so, but it still helps at the K-12 level. So I thought, even if I don't do this, it'll be beneficial. And so I got through that. And then I thought, well, I'm getting to a point where it's going to be now or never, because, it's, as time goes on, I think I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think it's easier to try new things and whatnot when, I I don't know, because I'm not at a point where I think I'll be like that. When, if I'm like 68 years old, I might not want to
try something new,
try this, right? But I don't know. Maybe I will. But so I thought, well, let's do this. And, I had met the qualifications and whatnot. And so I just started sort of shopping for a position. And North Carolina was always a place that I thought I would like to live. And so I just picked places that I thought I'd like to be. Mm-hmm. And then I met a match. I found a person that was willing to hire me and would give me a good opportunity to try different classes. And so sometimes that can be of a great benefit, working somewhere where you'll enjoy it, and also working for someone that you'll enjoy working for.
Yeah. So how long have you been there? And what schools?
I have been out here this is my fourth semester. And so at the end of the semester, it'll be 2 years. Uh-huh. And currently teaching at Rowan Cabarrus Community College. And then I have also taught at Catawba College, which is a 4-year liberal arts school in Salisbury, North Carolina.
What are you teaching? So you mentioned an art history class. You're sort of like all across the board, it seems. Right? Yeah,
it's for some reason I guess over the years have made myself a little bit diverse in some of the different things I've studied. And so I have had an opportunity here to be able to teach like drawing 1 and 2 and art history. And then I've taught like typography and graphic design, and now even teaching this digital film class, which has been really fun because I haven't been doing as much of that lately. And it's kind of like reigniting all that, excitement from some of the stuff we were talking about earlier in this conversation.
Those things are so different because, film is so collaborative. You're working with other students, you're working with other people, you've got a crew. Whereas a drawing class, unless you have a model, you're doing it all by yourself. And I mean, those are so different. The form is so different. I mean, fine art to applied art, is such a different thing. So how do you juggle that? How does your brain work to make it work, to make you go from a drawing class to a film class? They're so different.
Yeah, they're incredibly different. And I think like the main thing that like I kind of lean on is that I really enjoy both a lot. And so it's like, and I think we all have like different aspects to our personality or whatever it might be that makes us tick. And so I just kind of lean on that. But you're right. The drawing class is much more individual, is much more focused. You're teaching them to like see deeply, like really look at, what it is, especially if it's observational drawing, what it is, that start paying attention closer. And like, and this because of, many years of doing it, but in a film class, it's much more about, the story and like getting them moving and the action that needed to like get things produced and like, and the equipment. And
to me, it's project management. Teaching a film class, running a film class, running a film production, you have to get from start to finish in the project and you've got a bunch of people and a bunch of moving parts. And where in a drawing class, in theory, one could do a simple drawing in a very short period of time all by themselves. They could go home and put a bowl of fruit out on their kitchen table in front of them and draw it from different perspectives. And it's just not a project. It is an individual project, but film is, you're looking at groups of people and so many moving parts where there just seems to be fewer moving parts in, say, drawing or painting.
And I think that's like the appeal for some people, whereas like drawing, it could be the autonomy that appeals to people. That's what, motivates them to be able to work individually and, have, the control. And with film, it could be the collaborative aspect that motivates people. And like some of the stuff we talked about earlier, where that these 4 people are going to, make this that much better, and you're excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. So what are you doing? Any of your own creative work these days? What are you doing?
My personal creative work is a little more in the design realm these days. And so I feel like that's kind of where things are headed for me. But the exciting thing about that is it's becoming very multidisciplinary, and there's a lot of integration of a lot of the skills, with like motion graphics and things of that nature involving the skills that you might have picked up early in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to do it all over again, I'd want to make sure I took a design class. In fact, I actually think some basic design is really important for people in the arts. I mean, just understanding typography, understanding colors, understanding composition. I think a basic design course is maybe should be required across the board at an art school. I just think it's important, and I know it's something I didn't have.
I think we're seeing that in the world too. Like the difference between all of the things that we use and interact with, and everyone knows when they come across something that's well designed versus poorly designed. And I think that even companies are catching on to that it's important to have really good design.
Yeah, and a user interface has to work, and all that kind of stuff works together. So what do you see your future being? What do you academically and both creatively? What do you see the next, you've got 20 some years of a working life left in front of you, I mean, what do you see happening? What would you like to have happen? Maybe that's an easier question to answer.
To make it simple, I would like to be working creatively and also be taking what I've learned and giving it back. So I feel like there's going to be a sort of a combination of some sort of professional creativity and then also some level of giving back, and whether that's structured academic format or, I mean, there's so many avenues these days for it, but I couldn't quite predict it, but I know I'll be doing exactly what I'm doing now, just on some other level, making stuff and teaching stuff.
That's really great. And you don't know how proud I am of you as a former student of mine who became a teacher, who did all of the hard work to become a teacher. It's really great. It's sort of a weird sort of legacy kind of thing, though you're doing something completely different from what I do. But it's just great to see that you picked up on that, and maybe that's why I picked you to be a TA. I sort of saw that in you,
I'm entirely with you on that, and I think to give you a lot of credit in all of this as well, that I think it was Charles Schultz. I don't remember the quote verbatim, but it was like something along the lines that he's like, you won't remember who won the Oscar 10 years ago. You won't remember who was the Super Bowl MVP 5 years ago, but you'll always remember, your favorite teacher. And like, I've been very fortunate in my life to have a lot of great teachers, and maybe it's no accident because, some of my great influences, you included, were on that path. And so it probably helped shape me. Yeah. And I think there's some truth to his quote. I can remember working in a restaurant when I was putting myself through college to get that teaching education and license. And like, you've had a lot of opportunity, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of opportunity to meet some people that have done some things, and it's fun and whatnot. But I remember I was behind the bar serving meals and drinks and stuff like that. And I saw my favorite teacher from middle school come through the doors. He was on his way to a basketball game. And like, no joke, I've never wanted to jump that bar and like go say hi to somebody. And I saw a lot of people come through those doors, but is there something about it? Like, seeing him that night, it was exciting. And I think that there's a truth to, and that quote isn't verbatim, but there's a truth to it. Yeah. There's an influence from those people that you've crossed paths with.
I don't think there's a teacher in the world who gets tired of having a former student come up and say hi or thank you or something like that. So I'm sure if you did jump over the bar, he was very happy to see you as well.
Yeah, and the only thing would be like, you change a lot since you were 12. So like, I know I've had a lot of students that grew up, and I'd be at like the checkout at Best Buy, and then I hear this deep voice say like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Pollock," and I look up and I'm like, you're like, oh, hi, James. It's like, recognize you as a grown man.
That's really funny. So, and that's because in, I guess, K through 12, they do call you Mr. Pollock. I mean, that's such a weird thing,
Yeah, it took a little bit.
I've always been Peter. I mean, it's always crazy to me when someone says Mr. Hawley. I look over my shoulder for my dad. So we've talked, and we you and I caught up a little bit last week. Anything you want to add? Anything I forgot about here? Or any old story that you remember? I'm not, if there's nothing, we're done. And it's been great talking to you. And it's, your journey is certainly unique, certainly as on this podcast. But anything you wanted to add?
Well, the only thing I would add is that just so your audience knows that all the opportunities that you gave as an educator, your students. And so you had mentioned handpicking me as a TA, but what we didn't mention is you also hired me, and I worked for your production company for 3 years and was able to be on professional film shoots and be around that and experience it. And so it's I was at film school, but I was also working on films. And so just to sort of make sure that I just want you to understand that I appreciated that. And
well, thank you. And of course, I appreciated all you guys that worked with us. We always did it after, you were not in the class immediately, in the current class. But I think it's really valuable. I think what makes me a good teacher, if I'm a good teacher, is because I have a foot in the real world and a foot in the classroom, and you just described the same thing. But I think showing students this is how it's done, is you can't get over that. I mean, you've got to wow, this is how he really works. This is the other side of his brain. So I was really glad. I wish I could have brought every student on, and as many times as we could, we'd bring a whole class over. But you and others actually worked with us and for us. And you just actually reminded me, in one of the first jobs Joe worked with us on, he walked away with my producing partner's keys in his pocket at the end of the day, and left him high and dry at the end of the set. But Jim always carried a spare key in his wallet, so he got home okay. But that was Jim's first impression of you, of the PA who walked away with my keys.
Yeah, and I apologize for that, and I actually don't remember doing that. So that's probably how much I did walk away with them, because I don't even remember doing that. But
he reminded me of that regularly.
Yeah, but that was in working around Jim. You bring up Jim. That was a great opportunity too, because and Jim also was a teacher, and that was an opportunity. I mean, there was a nice teamwork, you would do the directing, and Jim was just the master of the camera. And so you got to see sort of the two different, aspects of how things are made.
We were the two-headed monster, the two of us together worked well. Yeah, that was really great. Well, Joe, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, and I'm really proud of you. And I mean, I'm sure just hearing you talk, and I know how passionate you are about it. Your students benefit from having you, and I hope you have another great 20 plus years doing this and doing whatever you do, and we'll have to go to another Cracker Barrel soon.
Yeah, let's do it. And thanks so much for having me on, Peter. It's been great catching up and seeing you again, and I wish you all the best as well.
Great, thanks, Joe. All right, talk to you soon. Take care. All right, that's it. That's the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Joe Pollock from North Carolina via Skype. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm very, very proud of you. And thanks for bringing back some old memories. And do a good job with your students. Just a reminder, you can get us on iTunes and Google Play now, and Stitcher and SoundCloud, and even right on teachingthearts.com. You can listen to the podcast, share it with your friends and all that kind of stuff. And you can reach me at teachingthearts@gmail.com or at TITA Podcast on Twitter. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. It is now time for me to get a drink.